This is Handscape. Handscape allows you to hand sculpt, hand paint, hand texture, and hand plant scenes that you build from within the scenes themselves. Handscape is radically different from any other approach on the market today, yet it's practical. Handscape is easy to learn. It's a simple, easily mastered skill rather than the memorization exercise of most interfaces. A few tools and principles suffice to build rich scenes in a familiar manner akin to playing in a sandbox. You think visually in terms of shape, color, and lines of sight, not mechanistically in terms of vertices, edges, trimming curves, and a huge set of commands and combinations. You're up and running in an hour and fully engaged within a day. Handscape produces scenes quickly. In the time it takes to build one scene in existing tools, you can develop 10 or more scenes in Handscape, resulting in greater output or a more fully realized design. Handscape is ideal for landscape design, including golf course design, for game design, set design, and any other application involving real or fantasy terrain. The purpose of this video is to give you the flavor of what it feels like to work in Handscape and to show you the advantages of two hands in immersion in scene sculpting and painting. Your own two hands are the key to Handscape's ease of use and productivity. Using this pair of tracked gloves, you can reach right into the scene, manipulating objects, tools, and space itself. A few pinch combinations such as thumb to forefinger, thumb to middle finger, and so on act like mouse button events. In this way, your gloves are like two tracked mice, one on each hand. These two cursors represent your hands. They float between thumb and forefinger. To grab an object, you simply touch the object and pinch thumb to forefinger. This works with either hand. Grabbing with both hands allows you to stretch objects, such as this flat tool. To move around, you simply grab space with the thumb to middle finger pinch. Push it and pull it with either hand. You rotate the world by grabbing with both hands and turning it like a steering wheel. To scale space, you grab and pull it apart to scale up. Or to scale the world down, you grab with both hands and squeeze the space together. We're naturally wired for two hands. We use both hands simultaneously without thinking. Handscape takes advantage of this natural dexterity and is easier to learn and use because of it. Grabbing objects in space represents perhaps 80% of Handscape's interface. The remaining 20% is presented through its toolbox, seen here. Notice how the toolbox floats over your hand. It can be brought up and hidden simply by touching any finger on the left hand to any finger on the right. By selecting any of the mode icons, you can attach a variety of tools to your hand: a magnet, a sculpting tool, a paintbrush, and others. For example, by selecting the magnet on the toolbox, your hand becomes a magnet. When activated, it attracts geometry to it, either upwards or downwards. The ability to scale the world with your hands allows you to easily control the resolution of the magnet. Here we see how you can alter the reach of the magnet as indicated by the highlights simply by scaling the world. As we scale the world down, the relative size of the magnet increases, covering a greater area. As we scale the world up, the highlight shrinks relative to the world, allowing greater control at a finer resolution. This same principle applies to painting resolution, as we'll see later. We use this principle here to separate this landmass from the main island. We scale the world up a bit to cut this narrow channel. Another way of sculpting the scene is to enter sculpting mode simply by selecting it through the toolbox. In this mode, any object can be used to sculpt the surface. Here we browse for this flat tool and use it to cut the surface. We can work at finer resolution by shrinking the tool with two hands, putting it where we wish to work, and zooming in by scaling the world up. We can home in as many times as we like until we reach the scene's finest resolution. A variety of tools such as this adjustable trowel are provided with Handscape, but you can model your own to suit the task at hand. You can also sculpt with houses, trees, or whatever else is handy and shaped appropriately. We just browsed for a sculpting tool through the browser area of the toolbox. We can also browse for colors, textures, and backgrounds in this same area, simply by selecting the browser mode. We'll see more of this later. Let's look at the sculpting tools we've covered so far to see how they work together to sculpt this island. We'll add a little cove to this smaller offshore island using the magnet. And shear off the top with a flat tool. Notice that we constantly use viewpoint movement to alternate between a convenient working scale and a first-person scale. Here we perceive the island as 14 inches across, and now it's a half mile across. Here we drop into the cove for a look. You can paint the scene with both colors and textures. Handscape fully integrates sculpting and painting. What applies to the sculpting tools equally applies to the painting tools. To paint, we select the paintbrush from the toolbox and select a color from the color browser. There are two ways to paint. First, if we're not holding an object, our hand acts as a spray can, applying paint wherever there's a highlight. We can control the active area through world scale, just as we did with the magnet. Another way to paint is with a brush. Any object in the scene qualifies as a brush. Here we use the same flat tool we used to sculpt the scene to paint the main island. Let's use the same brush to apply some texture. We switch to the texture browser, pick a rock texture, and apply it to the cliffs of the offshore island. Now we check our progress from the little cove. Planning the scene is quick and straightforward. Let's create a forest on the smaller island. We reselect the object browser and browse into our tree library. Selecting a tree's image brings that tree into the scene. The clone action brings up an aiming bar to indicate where the tree will land when the pinch is released. We simply pinch repeatedly and trees automatically fall and plant. They all look alike, which is not okay for most applications, but we can simply grab them, rotating and stretching them for variety. If we're not happy with the tree, we can rip it loose and delete it. Now we pull ourselves into the forest for a first-person look. You can extend the library yourself, adding more trees, game-related objects, or anything else to populate your scenes. With the exception of a few optimization tools and special tools for landscape and golf course design, that's it. How many tools this powerful can be fully explained in just a few minutes. So who uses Handscape? Handscape is for all designers of fantasy and real landscape. Technical and non-technical users can produce stunning fantasy worlds or modify realistic actual locations in very little time. Traditional designers pick up Handscape quickly because its methods are familiar and natural. Handscape allows you to design and visualize simultaneously. In game design, this translates to building a strategy while inside the game level. Each design decision suggests the next, allowing you to discover visual and gameplay opportunities you'd never notice otherwise. This is in sharp contrast to traditional methods where the design phase is distinct from the audition phase, forcing a premeditated style of design. For example, suppose we're designing a game level that requires a path from the cove to a point on the far side of the big island. We need a path to the top of the cliffs. There are many ways to accomplish this, but we'll use the magnet. Let's walk up the path now. To cross the channel, we could create a land bridge or bring in a footbridge. Here we'll use the footbridge. Once in place, we can see if the view from the bridge is scary enough by putting ourselves there in the first person. Here we can evaluate the view as it affects our next move. Can we see too much or not enough from here? In this case, we can see too much, so we create a mountain across the center of the main island to obscure our view and check again. Next, we cut a canyon. You get the idea. You design the strategy based on the visuals. You don't have to drop the entire level ahead of time. Instead, you can let each step suggest the next. Here, the tool never gets in the way of the creative process. In fact, it encourages invention. Although the design of real landscape has much in common with that of fantasy terrain, it also has its own unique set of requirements. For example, this simple action would cost a great deal in earth-moving costs. To address this, Handscape's tools can be throttled back to avoid moving unrealistic amounts of earth. Here the magnet is made to operate at a rate of 6 inches per second. Real landscape can be quite complex. A single golf hole can consist of many tens of thousands of triangles or more. Handscape provides tools for controlling detail, concentrating it where it will have the most impact, on the green rather than the fairway, for instance. This same principle is equally important when creating fantasy terrains. To illustrate Handscape's utility in landscape design, let's go back to our island. Supposing this to be a real location now, let's decide on the best site for a house we plan to build. We position it at a potential site and pull ourselves onto the deck, a view of particular interest to the client. Once we've decided on a site for the house, we landscape it, taking the existing terrain and unruly neighbors into consideration. There are no surprises when you work this way. Your design is a form of visual contract that your clients understand. Readily available file format converters allow Handscape to fit into the workflow of many of the existing packages. You can start with the existing topology, modify it in Handscape, and load it into other tools for performing earthwork calculations. So that's Handscape. Handscape for fantasy terrain is available now and will be available for real landscapes, including golf courses, early in the year 2000. For more information, contact Digital Art Forms. Thanks for watching.